I could write an entire book on the history and power of apocalyptic rhetoric. Seriously, apocalyptic literature has been around almost as long as writing itself, particularly in the world of theology. But this is a YouTube video about video games and their environments. That means I'll have to narrow my definition. And I'm going to do so by talking about dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, or DDT. Deployed abroad during World War II, DDT was used as a powerful pesticide to protect our boys abroad from mosquitoes and the rogues gallery of terrible diseases they carried. And it worked, like really well. The chemical was so successful, in fact, that after the war, DDT was seen as a miracle of modern chemistry and was used by the tons in residential and agricultural settings alike. But something happened. We don't really blast people in the face with this stuff anymore, and the reason for this stems from a single publication. You see, you can't really talk about apocalypse and the environment in the world of literature without bumping into Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Carson's book revealed to the American public the dangerous effect of this pesticide on the environment. What Carson so eloquently describes in the opening chapters of Silent Spring is not a theological apocalypse, but an environmental one.
These sprays, dust, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes. Non-selective chemicals that have the power to kill every insect, the good and the bad, to still the song of birds and the leaping of fish in the streams. All this, though the intended target may be only a few weeds or insects. Can anyone believe it is possible to lay down such a barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life?
And here is precisely where we find my definition of an apocalypse game. Interaction within an adversarial environment devoid of useful, systemically occurring ludic resources. And let me be clear, when I say systemically occurring, I don't just mean stuff we can farm or mine. I mean anything the player can extract, acquire, craft, or pilfer from the game's field of play. If anything in the environment can assist the player in living or otherwise achieving a win condition, we can't really call it a true apocalypse game, can we? You would think games that fit this description would be a dime a dozen, especially given how often games are set during or around a narrative apocalypse, but that's not really the case from a mechanical standpoint. Let's take Supergiant's masterpiece Bastion, for example. This isometric action game is set in a world after a cataclysmic event. As the player explores their environment, the world literally builds itself under their feet, empowering players towards their narrative and ludic goals. Simply by existing and moving, the player is able to mold their external environment for their own gain in a world that, at least narratively, has been ruined. In addition, useful resources litter the field of play. Everything from weapons to currency is just waiting for players to harvest and exploit on their further adventures, even when those artifacts have already been claimed. The game's narrator Rux has this to say in one level in particular.
Good thing for those beasts the Calamity saved leftovers. We only found their little lair because they found themselves a little shard. The creatures of the wild, they've been building a bastion of their own. Those beasts been hoarding all the valuables they could find. But they ain't yet prepared for any company. Besides, we have to take back what's ours. Look at it this way, it's either them or us. But if we win, they win too. Our bastion is everybody's game, not just ours.
This imperialistic disposition towards the environment and its resources is presented as something akin to Manifest Destiny in American history. Even after the narrative end of the world, games like Bastion codify the external environment and its systems as a wilderness to be used. Wilderness. 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 Jesus, it's everywhere. Not that these games are bad or anything. In fact, all of these I personally enjoy. But this process of trying to find a true apocalypse game has taught me that using things in our real environment is so culturally ubiquitous and ingrained that we can hardly escape it in gaming. Now, logically this makes sense. Video games are made for people, and so they should, in many ways, conform to the general lived experience of both developers and players alike. But what happens when we break with this tradition? Well, for starters, we get masterpieces like Tetris. In many ways, Tetris is the perfect game for this definition. The constantly falling blocks place players in direct confrontation with the natural order of the ludic world, while simultaneously denying them any useful items or resources to prevent a win state. As play continues, the blocks fall faster, resulting in an inevitable failure. But don't worry, not all apocalypse games end in despair. Dance Dance Revolution similarly tasks players to step to the rhythm of arrows flying across their screen at any given time. Failure to do so yields a lose state, but the game never provides players with resources to mitigate this from occurring. DDR's complete lack of resources forces players to rely on skill alone instead of the typical combination of skill and resource management. In fact, all true Apocalypse games should do this. The only determining factor for player success is the player's ability and, depending on the game, randomization. And while this is terrific and really speaks to the core of what many games should strive to emphasize, I'm kind of disappointed at how few of these games yield interesting commentary utilizing their systems. Can some of these games be read as metaphors? Yeah, sure. In fact, I imagine this is the point in the video where you're expecting me to do exactly that. Connect Candy Crush to the Argentine Revolution, or compare Duchamp's Fountain to Flappy Bird. But I can't. Many Apocalypse games are so abstracted, it's difficult to assign them with any real meaning, and frankly most are either indie or mobile games anyway, which is to say off the Gen Pop's radar. But what I can do is complain. There is an insane amount of potential in this type of environmental interaction that is largely being ignored. So think of this video as more of a call to action, because I'd like to see an Apocalypse game that really challenges me to think. If you can think of any, let me know in the comments. But if you make games for a living, consider this me throwing down a gauntlet. Remember, environmental conflict and a lack of environmental utility. I'll be watching. In my next video, I'll be examining what these dead white guys and their terrible poetry have to do with one of video gaming's newest genres. See you soon.